Okay, friends and colleagues, for nearly 40 years, practically the whole world has believed that one way or another, some peace process had been going on between my country, Israel, and the Palestinians. In Israel, that process made regularly the headlines in between bloody terrorist attacks and bloody military operations day in and day out for long decades. It was only recently that the perfect match between the American President Trump and our Prime Minister Netanyahu had stopped the train of fake news that the newsmaker really believed were not fake. Earlier, practically every political commentator and every medium of mass communication in its headlines had been engaged and indeed enthralled by the diplomatic mediation and negotiations under the umbrella of our great mediator, the superpower, and our best ally, the United States. Its uninterrupted line of dedicated secretaries of state, Henry Kissinger, Cyrus Vance, Alexander Haig, George Shultz, James Baker, Warren Christopher, Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, and John Kerry shuttled in and out of the Middle East non-stop. To the best of my knowledge, I was the only one then who was saying and writing to all who would care to listen that nothing could come out of it. Once I even did something that, as far as I know, no reporter or commentator has ever done. I put my money where my mouth was. In the heat of the peace process in the early 1980s, with the first President Bush and Foreign Secretary James Baker, I challenged my reader in a newspaper article to bet me 10-1 that Israel will not concede 1 inch of the occupied territories as long as the government in that time was in power. The objective of this presentation is to give you the key for telling fake process from a real one. The key could also prevent you from officiating as mediators in negotiations which are no more than a continuation of war in diplomatic means. I wish to offer you the insight and the tools for making peace negotiations real. The key is blind areas on the cognitive maps of those people in conflict who are fanatical. Blind areas make them dehumanized, mentally blind to see their own human limitations, and that makes them susceptible to error and sin when in war with others. That is easy to understand. Otherwise, they could not be fanatics. You know, people in all religions, they pray. Part of the Pater Noster is, save me from evil, right? Now, the fanatic is completely unaware of the possibility of doing something evil in a war, in a conflict, in an intergroup situation. That's the dehumanization is a quite known concept, but not in this respect. It involves first the person himself or herself and our own group. Blind areas they are also mentally blind to see their enemies as individuals. They're being each different, human as themselves and able to change. They are blind to see this. Blind areas make it possible for fanatically oriented persons to navigate their conduct in war according to a fantastic cognitive representation of reality that is, we always good, right? Them always bad, guilty. Blind areas are the psychological mechanism that enables normal people believe even in the most obviously erroneous ideas about their enemies, and commit even the most outrageous acts of destruction and mass murder in good conscience, without running, and they do this without running into an intolerable cognitive dissonance with their own supreme values, like sanity, morality, truth, justice. Blind areas cover all aspects of war and conflict situation. I have made a discovery in my research in the last 2 decades of the 20th century, taking for evidence everything that was published in the Hebrew media in Israel about the conflict. For example, not one expression of the national consensual mind, that means of voices in line with the majority public opinion, the mass media, the government, the establishment, the collective national mainstream. Not one voice spontaneously uttered a feeling of worry about the moral standing of Israel and the Israelis in their close relationships as occupiers and rulers over the Palestinian population in the occupied territories. The possibility that we could become wrong and unjust in relation to the subjugated population as any oppressor was found to be a blind area. The possibility that any of our control and punitive measures against the population in occupied territories was too harsh, and that less extreme policy could be better for us, was found to be blind area. The possibility that we could initiate some moves or gestures in the direction of peace was found to be blind areas. The fact that the Palestinians under our control suffer was found to be blind area. Not a single evidence of sympathy with the victims was recorded, among them thousands of innocent civilians who were killed or wounded by our security forces by mistake as a collateral damage. The physical fact that our enemies are human as we are, or that their human rights should be granted and respected, was found to be blind area. The eventuality that something could change for the better in the enemies, in their position in conflict with us, was found to be blind area. The possibility that they may benefit by support, that we may benefit by supporting any of the international actors who made efforts to bring about a peaceful solution to our conflict, it too was found to be a blind area on the consensual national mind. Even the possibility that among those of us whose mind was not ridden by blind areas and who were critical of our policies, those who are habitually referred to in any war and conflict in the world as bleeding hearts or nigger lovers, could be sane and patriotic and moral people, and not only feeble-minded, self-hating, treacherous types. That too was found to be a blind area. The tool of identification and analysis of dehumanization is the dehumanization syndrome, available free for the asking. A list of symptoms comprised of blind areas and corresponding patterned beliefs. Actors in war can be easily identified as dehumanized by analyzing their public statements. Their strategic choices in management of conflict can be thus accurately, how do you pronounce it? Accurately, sorry. Can be thus accurately predicted. As long as their narrative fits the fanatic patterned beliefs and lacks any spontaneous evidence of awareness of blind areas, they could not, by force of their orientation system, wish to make peace, as long as they believe they could win in war. In the dehumanization syndrome, you will find that the possibility of the right tactics in certain situations not being using force, but giving in something, or making a reconciliatory gesture as a peace process requires, is a blind area. The corresponding pattern beliefs are: 1, only force. Maybe you heard, they understand only force. We hear it every morning almost. Until they have learned their lesson. Think about what you have learned, what lesson you have learned being victims of coercion, of force, of violence. Not using, number 2, not using force is weakness, stupidity, cowardice. Number 3, pattern belief: if force does not help, more force should be applied. And 4, last, if force has not helped, it's somebody else's fault, not ours. In addition, blind areas about the enemy prevent fanatics from seeing possible good intentions and changes in them. Their pattern beliefs leave only mistrust and using of force as logical, strategic means to apply in conflict with them. If we do not prevent them from destroying us by deterring them or destroying them, they'll destroy us. That is the only logical basis of strategy to follow, as long as the actors are dehumanized in their beliefs about themselves and the others. With their blind areas and such beliefs in their mind, human beings cannot wish to make peace. Unless using less force when using more force is an easy option, is not a possible strategy for the humanized fanatics. I was able to diagnose the key actors in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process at the time as dehumanized. That was the key to my self-assurance that the process cannot bring peace. It was like, either I am right or my theory of dehumanization is wrong. The theory of dehumanization has been right. So bless you, peacemakers. In many ways, your position as mediators between adversaries and enemies who at least agree to show up for negotiations already puts you in a kind of heaven in comparison with us who are killing one another in wars. But you must promote and achieve humanization of the dehumanized attitudes of both parties in order not to take part in a travesty such as has been going on in my life for nearly half a century now. Now, application of the above in mediation and conflict resolution. Prior to negotiations on substantive issues, participants of both parties must be facilitated through a series of structured group and team experiences. This is where you come. Aimed at humanization of their attitudes to self and others. Then they could be introduced to the concept of dehumanization and learn to identify its symptoms, including in their own conflict-related discourse. Then they should be charged by the mediator with a task that would facilitate humanization of their attitudes to each other. I wish to suggest to you a number of procedures in mediation of hard conflicts that could, indeed should be applied on all levels of negotiations between parties, interpersonal, intergroup, and international. Upon beginning facilitation of parties in conflict towards its resolution, the mediator should specifically declare that prior to negotiations on the content issues, the positions, demands, and claims of each party, they will be facilitated through a workshop, humanization workshop, with the goal of eliminating the humanized attitudes and prejudices and of building trust. Mediators should make it clear to them that without a conscious effort of all to eliminate, at least significantly reduce the humanized, prejudiced attitudes, and without building a degree of mutual commitment to human values of peace and human equal rights, including those of their adversaries, enemies, negotiations could not reach agreement. Agreement of the party on that should be part of the working contract with which peacemaker could, without which peacemakers could not agree to operate as facilitators of the process. Whether facilitating negotiations in presence of two parties or of just one, you could start the process with presenting them with a document titled Personal Commitment to Peaceful Resolution of the Conflict. Real commitment to peaceful resolution must be also a commitment to humanization of the way negotiators believe of themselves and of their adversaries. The mediator would declare that each participant should sign the document before the actual negotiations on content issues could start. That should be the necessary precondition for your mediation to continue. The personal commitment could contain items as the following. That's my suggestion, any other could be good. I commit myself to the belief that my enemies are human individuals, each different and unique like us. I do not deny their human rights and their universal rights I claim for myself and my people, to be free, live in peace, and be treated as equals. Two, I do not wish to or intend to destroy the other party as an enemy or manipulate them into submission. I am committed to a resolution of the conflict that will do justice to their claims as to our own. Three, I commit myself to change any of my present attitudes towards the other party and the issues in conflict if, in the process of these negotiations, a better, more fair, and more just solution to the problem will emerge. Then, structured experiences. Towards signing the personal commitment, participants could be facilitated through a series of structured experiences such as the following, or many more. Telling personal stories. For example, when and how I first learned as a child that we are in conflict or war, and with you or with some other people. I cannot resist to telling you an anecdote. Once, the name forgot me, a very, very popular, Marcuse, Herbert Marcuse, at the time of the 60s, he was a very popular Marxist writer. So his wife, Martha, did this, trying to bring people, especially children, to negotiate in the warring party. And she introduced this exercise. There were some people from the top echelons of the education ministry and some others, and I came there too. And we were sitting around a large table, and she said, tell me, when you remember, as far as you could remember, that you became, aware that there are we and them, that there is some conflict, that they are not we and we are not them. And everybody knows those stories. One man, one of the most prominent actors in the education system in Israel, he was a secretary of the General Teachers Union and a member of the parliament. He said, he was born, of course, not in Israel, but in Europe, in Eastern Europe, where most of the Jews who came to Israel later. He said, my father told me that I should beware of the goyim. How do you say goyim in English? You know what I mean? Because they are drunkards and they are blood spillers. You know, decades passed, I became old, and do you know what? He was right. That was in a workshop for how do you educate against racism? Okay, so this could be an exercise. How do I refer? Because if you ask people to refer to their childhood, it's not threatening as much. They were children. They are not exactly responsible for what they were at that time. Now, active listening. No one could express their minds unless he or she succeeded in summarizing what the other person had said and obtained from the other confirmation that yes, the person was well understood. You know, if I understand you correctly, you said, you just, this is called active listening. It does wonder in my experience. That's the listening and the empathy exercise. Structured experiences such as the prisoner dilemma, games in which the only way to win is taking a risk of trusting the other, and competition inevitably leads to failure. Personal trust-building experiences between delegates of opposing sides, such as leading the blind. One person is blindfolded and the other one has to lead him or direct him verbally through a distance, then changing roles. Have you ever done that in any of the workshops you participated? Leading the blind? You know, it evokes a lot of practical learning about the humanization. Participants should be given text relating to the conflict, their own, and the text of the adversaries, and analyze them for blind areas and their corresponding pattern beliefs. For example, looking for instances of awareness of a blind area, like expression of compassion and sorrow for the innocent victims on side of the other party, or for any victims. Or examples of views that prefer peaceful conciliatory means of managing the conflict rather than force, or other blind areas and pattern beliefs as in the dehumanization syndrome. I want to say something about practical chances of such non-negotiation without humanization attitude. The theory of dehumanization is a new concept. I cannot bring you any evidence of success in applying it as a humanization process prior to negotiations on content issues. It has not been done yet in the international conflict negotiation. I can only assure you that without it can be no genuine peace process. You can spare yourself the illusions. You may well chuckle imagining the heavyweights of politics, such as operate regularly in parliaments, national conventions, and on TV, go through such experiences in a workshop. But mediators worth their grain would not mind. They are skilled in facing all kinds of resistances. And they will be pleased to know that they won't be deceived in doing their job. No peacemaking without humanization could be a strong platform to stand on. Politicians who publicly present themselves for peace will bear the consequences if they will try to sabotage the humanization effort. Doing something new in the world does not come easy. You may rightly conclude that suggesting a humanization workshop to delegates of countries in war would be like inviting carnivores to a vegetarian dinner. That is a decision for mediators to make, whether to try it or not. I can only assure you that without humanization in some form, the process of negotiations for peace cannot be real. The rest is in your hands. I wish you strength and courage. Thank you. I have some one-page papers which summarize this talk, so whoever will.
Hi, my name is Tzofnat, so I'm an Israeli. I have some good news, maybe you are familiar with it, maybe not. Do you hear me?
Yes, but not good enough.
Not good enough, I'll get closer. Nice to meet you, thank you very much. So I'm also an Israeli, and I'm saying that I might have good news for you if you're unaware of it. I mean, it's not about us. Sometimes we're unaware of things and our life is plenty of noises, but they are not biases. I'm a psychologist, so I'm using this language.
Very much.
Yeah, great. So in Israel, actually, we did some work. I did it in democratic schools. If you're familiar with the project, we started with one school, and today there are more than 30 of them in Israel. And also in other work that I've done, and it was based on a framework of respect. So this is how we started the relationship, how we refer what is the attitude of the other and how valuable is the other. And it boils down to power relationships, actually. The whole thing, actually, I'm writing my dissertation now about that, taking my experience and incorporating it with theoretical frameworks, including respect-based framework that is Schlanger. Jacob Schlanger, if you heard the name, he's a philosopher emeritus in the Hebrew University, and he wrote something fabulous about respect that I have used for 20 years. So this is how we construct relationships, and this is how I explain today how you can transform conflict, adversarial interactions into dialogic being. Meaning dialogue for me is not how we do a conversation, is how we be with each other. So I just wanted to add that there's a lot of knowledge around it, and I'm using it, so I think it goes hand in hand with what you're talking about.
Well, we are veering off the focus on mediation, but I believe that making people aware of the phenomenon, the human prevalent reality of blind areas with regard to oneself and others is necessary to make any real progress in humanization of individuals in society. Now the good news is, which I also want to give you in writing, I hope that we are not developing here a dynamic of somebody suggests something and somebody responds by, I'm suggesting you something else. I really, if I may confess, I just celebrated my 80th birthday. At this stage, and especially today, when I came here to deliver something which I hope, I believe, would be good for, would help interested people really. I have this dehumanization syndrome. It's a tool, the short tools, I will remember that. It's a tool, diagnostic and analytical tool, by which you can analyze and diagnose persons for dehumanization, for fanaticism, as accurately and perhaps more than the DSM, with which people measure and diagnose personal disorders, any person, phobia or paranoia or schizophrenia, you name it. So it's a tool of symptoms. It lists, I listed them briefly to you, what the media in Israel never mentioned, the mainstream media, not those who are labeled leftists now, leading hearts, etc. So there is this available for everyone, this tool to measure exactly the symptom, the phenomenon. So we are no longer speaking about dehumanization or about anything else, but we know exactly what we are talking about. There is a lot of difference. We can take text, we can take expressions of other people, of children, of our students, of everybody, and analyze them and present them, feed them back to people who would know what the humanization is, we know the symptoms. For instance, if I'm a teacher in a classroom in middle school, and a child says, no, you cannot do anything with Arabs. They understand only force. And we have learned already the pattern belief regarding strategy, which is they understand force. We say, oh, what you just said fits this pattern. Would you like to comment on that? That's enough to bring this to awareness, because arguing with a dehumanized person, with a fanatic, if you try, is like arguing with a well-programmed computer in which the most important data, that we are human, individuals, changing, etc., is missing. There is no such data in this computer. So you are surely going to get an answer in one of the patent beliefs. And they work because they enable people to go on and go with this attitude, and from conflict to one war to another.
How can we keep that so?
Somebody hasn't had a chance.
Yes.
I would like to thank the presenter for the humanization and perhaps the contribution of the for respect-based approach to framework.
For what?
She has come up with the respect-based framework that is taking place in Israel, and we talked about humanization. But I would like to bring in a balance that humanization and the respect-based approach that are taking place in Israel may need, in one way or another, to be balanced. Because if they work in Israel and the neighbors are not worked on, this means
the neighbors are what?
the neighbors, the Arabs.
Yeah.
If there is a process taking place in Israel and it is not cutting across to the Arab Palestinians,
Yeah.
this means we shall always remain into the intractable process of the conflict. And perhaps that is the reason why.
Excuse me, I'm not sure that I understand. What process does take place in Israel and does not take place in the Palestinians?
If there is mediation, humanization programs taking place, the teaching about conflict resolution, the respect-based approach, the community sensitization in conflict resolution, if they are taking place in Israel, Arabs should not be taken as if they like war. We have to use force.
Yeah.
They need to have the same balanced approach in order to have peace. And perhaps this has been the reason why, since 1945 up to the present moment, the conflict has been ongoing. The Israelite is teaching respect-based. The Arab, the other side, is teaching your enemies and Israel. So we need to balance, I think, such that we create peace in the region.
Well, as far as I know, there are efforts on the Palestinian side also to humanize their attitudes
and there are many mediators who go to Palestine and go to Israel. And I tell you the truth, if I were a Palestinian, I would worry primarily for my own people, because I know the language and I know the culture, and I can be involved and I can be active. But basically, it has nothing to do with them, with the concept of the enemies. It has to do with everybody, and first and foremost in our midst, in ourselves. We need to humanize our own society. In the political terms of negotiations, the Palestinians are willing to negotiate, but they should not, I don't think them being more humanized than the Israelis. They are simply weak. They somehow know that they cannot win the war. Israel is responsible for the situation because we are the occupiers, we are the dominant power there. And as long as the dominant power is dehumanized in its attitude to the other party, it won't budge.
You're saying that both sides have to, but it's incumbent upon the dominant power to especially pay attention to it.
Yeah, you see, but there is also a danger, because this is a very, very popular, you can imagine, popular pattern, belief of people who tend to war orientation and to fanaticism, to say, well, look at them, what did they do to us, and what about them, why do not they, etc., etc. So this is not what I meant. I meant humanization has to, it's a personal issue. You know, I have this direct exposition approach, which I acquired as a result of a war trauma, very badly hit. And after this war trauma, I said, in order to go on living, I have to understand why, really why it happened to us that afternoon. And all the abstract reasons, historical reasons, geopolitical reasons, economic reasons, are all abstract. There's an endless chain of causation leading to biblical times of the conflict between the Israelites and the other people and so on. And I got about my trauma. When the real cause for wars in general, for that event, occurred in my mind, the real cause was the Syrian gunner who sat on the other side, and he received an order to shoot, and he aimed well and pulled the trigger. That's the real reason. That is why it happened. So the real reason for wars are warriors. I think it's in the Charter of the United, or UNESCO, I think, it's right, that since war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men we must erect the ramparts of peace. Something like this. It's very, very true. Politics, and including violent politics, the worst, the best, is human behavior. I'm sorry, I'm a psychologist. Human behavior, nothing but human behavior. Only human behavior, nothing like human behavior. Not to be a dictator, to be a politician. You don't have to learn your own dictator. It's very easy. Some people have it in their blood. They have to just talk nicely and to tell everybody what they want to hear and to do some kind of manipulation. But if you really want to change things for the better, you should learn the motivation and the essence of human motivation in developing relationships. It has to do with his identity, of course.
I think. Okay.
Thank you, sir. On a lighter moment, I wanted to ask. Thank you. I wanted to ask something lighter. Are there some Israelites who have married Palestinians, or are there some Palestinians who have married Israelites, or it is a taboo? They are not even supposed to mingle.
Not much, not many, but they are. Here, there, they are. You know, I believe that with every baby who is being born in this world, a hope for humanity is being born. People are different. Each one is different. But there are some. it's very difficult, you know. I'm sure that even in this country it could be difficult with people of all ethnic groups, religious ethnic groups in particular, to intermarry.
Why I'm asking is if we could do, or if it could be brought as one way of peacemaking process, and they put it in practice, they encourage it. Maybe the next 45 years, we might have brotherhood where this conflict has ended. Because it will be.
Sorry, could you say it again?
You've understood me? I'm trying to say that if like we would to put, or it would be put into consideration, and the marriage is accelerated, is encouraged at a higher level, maybe after some years, this conflict will be removed because they will feel it is brother, it's
I mean, you're saying the higher levels are not encouraged. We have this lower level, which is, I think, very impressive on both sides, right? The dehumanization, the teaching young kids on both sides. But you see at least I'm aware of the Israeli side, doesn't seem at the higher level to be doing anything. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm trying to say,
interfaith marriage.
If we could make interfaith marriages, we encourage them to intermarry. They are encouraged to intermarry.
Oh, intermarry.
Yeah.
You cannot very well encourage people to do something in terms of marriage. You know?
we have, I think tomorrow, I think it's about Albania and intermarriage, and how intermarriage is encouraged and goes through the generations. It is recognized and accepted and even promoted.
Yeah.
I think that would be really well in between Muslims and Jews. That's quite interesting.
You know, objecting.
I don't know if you want to.
Sometimes people are violent when their children want to marry somebody from. That's terrible. But marriage and intermarriage is something which I would leave to the individuals, to let them be free. Because it cannot be reconciled with personal freedom, to being told who should you marry.
Okay, we should only have one more question, I'm sorry. So why don't we...
First, I want to thank you for having the courage to be a voice of peace that goes against the dominant narrative in your society. That's such a strong thing. You were talking about the stigma associated with having a critical voice. That there's a stigma associated with having a critical voice. That in a society where there's a narrative of dehumanization, when you have a critical voice of that narrative, that's stigmatized and dismissed and disregarded or marginalized. Can you talk more about the destruction of the stigma of the critical voice?
The critical mind?
The way people in Israel would be prejudiced against and express prejudice against people who criticize the current government, I guess.
Yeah, what can you do to strengthen the critical voice? The voice that says that what can you do to strengthen the voice of humanization within Israel, the allies?
Well, I don't know of any means other than talking to people, communicating, publishing, speaking, but doing it in a proper way, in a human way, which humanizes.
I would say,
by the way,
get more of that side out to vote.
I am not stigmatizing Israel. In Israel, you can speak freely and make fun of the government and be sarcastic, everything. There is complete freedom of expression. Why? Because nobody is listening.
Is your diagnostic tool available?
Sorry?
Is your diagnostic tool available?
Yes.
The one that you described?
Yes, sure.
How do I find it?
I should give it to you.
Yes, yes, you should.
The last question. Let her say the last word, okay?
Just a last question / comment that sort of brings in what you were asking and what he was saying. One of the things that I wonder about is if you humanize, do you sort of isolate yourself from your community? This goes on whether I'm a black woman, Muslim, Christian, Jew, and I say, no, what you're doing is wrong. No, this person has a legitimate point of view. I am no longer a part of my group, tribe. I've seen it all over, whether it's in the Sudan, Somalia, wherever. If you speak up as a voice of reason and say, no, he has a legitimate point of view. I can do that, and this goes to your stigma, but I'm actually excommunicated around the world. So I'm wondering if there are any thoughts on this, or is this something that we can do further research, or you can point us to research on this question. So if I say that the Israelis are humans and they have a right to exist as an Arab, right? As an Arab, they say, no, Michelle, you can't say this because I'm no longer defending my group. So it becomes a disincentive to recognize legitimacy, whether it's in whatever it may be. I'm excommunicated. Are you aware of any research that addresses or that informs on how to stand firm and tall when you risk being excommunicated from your ethnic, religious, gender group? Can you give us any thoughts on that? Or anybody?
You know, if you would be ever excommunicated from your community because you are humanized,
right,
and you recognize that every person is humanized, is human uniquely, and every individual life cannot be measured in value, etc. And if you are excommunicated for that, then it's not worthwhile to remember that community.
No, I agree. But you have to be strong, because in terms of negotiation, you're trying to sometimes get people to come, whether it's Sudan, Somalia, to come to the table and find a solution.
Yes.
But you have to go home with them, right? And they'll say, no, but you're not, I don't know, a Dinka, you're not what, if you find a way for a solution. And lastly, I see that's particularly the case when you have men sitting around the table, because it's seen, as someone was talking earlier, about a sign of weakness. So not only as a man, you're weak, you're also you're not really representing your tribal or ethnic view. So what do you do? Any thoughts, and can you direct us?
If you were in such a situation, number one, I would say to you, you must decide. I cannot decide
right.
To solve this conflict for you.
I'm sorry.
I was talking about a situation in which the negotiators were the official representatives of their government. And yet, this humanization process would bring them into conflict. It would not be easy for them. Some of them would run away. And then they will be exposed. But at least you, as a mediator, you will not be participating in the sham negotiation. It must be real. Otherwise, I would believe you should say, no, I'm not performing in something this is not really working, like continuation of war by diplomatic means. They have nothing to lose.
I think we have to go to lunch.